Hello, everyone, and welcome back into another episode of the Taekcast. Not out on Wednesday, not out on Christmas Day. Mr. Michael Leone is our guest this week, and Thursday worked for both of us, so we are a day late. And Michael, after I think this is episode 389, maybe,
The
you
return.
were the first guest on this program. Long time ago. I'm very glad to have you back, Mike. A lot of things happen in between the two episodes of that show.
It feels good to be back. And yeah, I was late for the recording because I lost track of time. So I feel like the tables have turned here a little bit.
You know, Michael, I have many flaws in life. So many. Too numerous to even get into in one episode of this show. One thing that I am not is I am not late. I might
Assuming you
forget.
have the time zone
That's the
correct.
thing. I might forget. I
Yeah.
might not have the time zone right, but I'm always a casual 10 to 5 minutes early to everything because my mother growing up was late to everything.
Oh my God.
I mean, dude, just like soccer practice, just whatever. You name it, we were late. And I was like, dude, I am not going to be a late adult. I might forget entirely. You might just not have me there, but that'll be because I'm an idiot, not because I'm an asshole. And I think those are two very distinct things. So, Michael, I've really, since I've become self-employed, I've been pondering this a lot because I'm in the content mines and I use everyone. I use the solver, I use all of it, and ETR is a very important website. And I'm just always curious how like you and Evan and Drew and Gallagher. I mean, this would maybe even be a better question for them. But just knowing that what you spend your Monday through Friday working on is truly going to be taken as roughly gospel of thousands of people across the country as they put their hard-earned US dollars into daily fantasy sports contests. I mean, it's really, and even people who don't like you. I was talking about this with Drew and with you on the Spoolcast members only. Even people that don't like you guys or think you're bad at their jobs still have to be aware of what you're telling people because that influences what their opponents are doing. So anyway, that's a long question. Let's just go with this. How does it feel, Michael, to know that you're so important?
It's very weird to know how many. I guess like I would start with props as the biggest example. I always kind of underestimated Taylor, our CEO, kind of like would talk about the influence ETR has. And I was always kind of like, yeah, I mean, I guess. And like, wasn't sure I totally bought it. But once we started doing props and like major sports books are moving their lines within 5 seconds of us putting something out was definitely some sort of paradigm shift, I guess, in my brain in terms of our influence. So it's pretty wild. It's tough because, Adam says this all the time. Like, it's easier to beat the sports book than to be the sports book because you've got people who all they need to do is find like 3 to 5 spots that you're wrong out of everything that you do, all the sports that you do all week long. And with ETR, it's kind of similar. You get people that hate on us because they think, we're dumb for like one projection or another. But, there is probably an edge if you're good at knowing where the ETR projections are wrong, given that the influence is
Well,
so
buddy,
wide.
you'd think that because I mean, I assume that you guys do projections in a very different way than when we did them when you and I and Drew worked together.
Yeah.
But I do at least know from doing projections myself, inputs like an input volatility and the assumptions you have to make. Because like if you think about it, many people who play daily fantasy sports, no matter the sport, have never had to sit down and think about what goes into that number. What goes into projecting Deebo Samuel for 15.5 DraftKings points? Like, how do you arrive at that number? So like the way it worked way back in the day, I mean, we're talking like when John Bales was writing books about how to win a daily fantasy for dumb people, it was like, okay, you do the team total, you do percentage of the touchdowns that Rob Gronkowski scores, and then you kind of just fudge it from there. You could do it in an Excel spreadsheet. It won't take very long to, I don't know. What do you guys use? What are you using now? You don't have to give too much of the secret sauce away, but like what program do you use?
I mean, the framework of what we're doing is not overly complex in terms of, like you said, take the team total, divvy up the touchdowns, figure out the play calling, divvy up the target shares, figure out the efficiency. But in terms of getting that right based on how teams have performed over the last few weeks or adjusting who they played for and all that stuff, that's where it's hard. And we've made a lot of improvements. I think the last couple of years, particularly this past offseason, we've seen like a big improvement year over year last year and then again this year in our projections. And, not coincidentally, we started putting together like an actual data science team instead of just me like hacking stuff together on my own prior to last NFL season. So those improvements are, not coincidental. So, getting at those numbers can be like complex. There's some machine learning element to that. But the actual framework, honestly, is not super complex. I think something else we've done better is a combination. Like we're all playing these games and we're also looking at the props market so much. So I think we've gotten better at like, if we're off market on a projection, like really making sure like that's a stand we believe in.
That you feel good about the stand,
Yeah.
not this is what our data said because of the way we did it, and there's something else that we're not seeing. Because what you don't want to do if you're working on projections is miss something that leads to a bad projection. Like if you
Right.
have a projection that's off market, like I've argued about this with like Derek before, Derek Cardy, not argued, but just talked about it with him. Like no one's projections are off market more than Derek.
Yeah.
In terms of like what you can purchase on the open market. And I use Derek stuff just because it's just available. And I like to, sometimes it's kind of nice to know, like, if I was off market, what would it look like? Not saying
Yeah.
I think Derek is the gospel or that I would use it, but it's just kind of nice. But j- something I learned early on is if you're off market on like 50% of your projections, there's probably something you're doing wrong. The likelihood of you doing something wrong is higher than the likelihood of you being right.
Yeah. And like the confidence, I mean, the way we look at it in terms of props sometimes too is like, if we're showing, a certain amount of expected value, like if we're not willing to take that bet, we should probably just change the projection. And I think like back, a handful of years ago, wouldn't necessarily say we were like slaves to the output necessarily, but we were kind of like, this is our process. What it spits out, it spits out. Not saying that it's gospel, but like we were a little bit less, I guess, of control freaks in terms of what was out there. It was kind of like, this is our model. Not that we didn't care. I don't want that to come off wrong, but just now we're like a lot more, intentional in terms of like what we're putting out. And I think we're better too at thinking through honestly like the qualitative aspect of things. So it's kind of like we've gotten better at both like the base math, but then also you can look at the target shares of the last 4 games of T Higgins between Jamar Chase, but then you can also just know that Jamar Chase is who he is, and like should you
Right.
really project T Higgins for more targets, and that's really difficult. We've seen that in a few spots this year, like Jalen Waddle's targets with Miami. It's like long view versus short view. There's some stuff there that we've, I think, gotten better at, figuring out how to massage and like how to like try and get the best of both worlds, if you will.
What's the most annoying spot for you to project? This is my guess. It's wide receivers who run some because that messes with the ceiling scaling. It's like wide receivers who average like a rush and a half per game. That's my guess for the most annoying spot to project.
That's not too bad anymore. We've gotten better at that stuff. And the quarterback rushing, we've gotten a lot better at too, like in terms of making that like divvying up like sneaks, designed runs, scrambles instead of just having like a one catch all like rush share.
Right.
The most annoying spots, I think, for as far as like the base projections that go out, honestly, for me, I think it's the teams that you just don't know what their game plan is going to be on a given week. Like there's some teams like Cincinnati that have, very heavy plus pass rate over expectation. You can figure that out relative to the spread. They're always going to be like plus 7% or whatever, and it's going to be pretty good. Then there's teams like the Bills that it's like you just don't know. Like they could come out and be very heavy pass rate over expectation, or they could come out and straight boomer ball it. Like you don't really know what they're going to do. And that's something I think in our sims, we want to like figure out how to capture better next year in terms of treating teams differently in terms of the variance of their play calling and not just like their basic play calling. But though that's frustrating because that flows through to everything, the top level play calling.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Sims, because when you and I worked together,
No
Sims,
sense.
there were no Sims, and then correct me if I'm wrong, in my memory, you kind of started to hack together a sim for Showdown.
Yes.
Not if and again, if I remember correctly, not so much for high projected lineups, but for deduping was the purpose of it initially, or is that wrong?
So what I did for Showdown was the most basic sim you could have, which is like, okay, just assume an out of the box distribution. I think it was like a gamma distribution that I used. And then simulate that like X times for each player, and then sort of like feed in a correlation matrix to rearrange the sims to reflect the correlation matrix. So you overall, you would have like, I don't know, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase's correlation would be right overall, but you would definitely have some outputs where it was like, oh, they both scored like 35 plus points or something that like are unrealistic, because I wasn't simulating the game. Yeah, I was just simulating fantasy scores and having them correlate. And at the point in time, this was for Showdown, it was a real big edge, because even though they weren't perfect, it got on the onslaught stuff before it was popular in the market, the 5-1 stuff, which now seems like,
The
not
meta.
really much of an edge at all. And was just live. Like I felt like every week there for a year, like we were like semi-live almost every Showdown slate, because almost solely because my sims, as bad as they were giving me more 5-1s than the field was playing.
All right, this is sort of what's the right way to phrase this? Like, I've been using the word for so long that I'm afraid to ask what it means. Literally, what is a sim? Tell me what is taking place inside of a computer when you are doing a play level sim. What is taking place when you say I ran the Sims? What is actually happening?
Yeah, are you talking about like what we do now, or versus like what I used to do, or just in general?
Just like in general, like
So like
the,
you could simulate, like you would just say you could simulate a coin toss and be like the probability is 50-50, and then like
that I
literally,
understand, because that
so
is
that's
very easy
essentially
to
what you're doing,
conceptualize.
just on a much broader scale. Like you're fitting to a distribution, like what I was doing for a Showdown was like, Debo Samuel projected 18 points, like fit a distribution. Based on that distribution, you've got X% odds of, every point on that curve being
So
selected.
it's not. Goddamn, people are gonna
So
think
now
I'm dumb.
that's different from like we're simulating games now. So like we're
That
simulating like, you
so
know,
when you say simulating a game, is this like pressing the sim button on Madden when you're trying to get through to the NFL draft? Like, what is literally I press
yeah.
sim on the solver. What is executing in the back end when I press that button?
So, well, if you press it on solver, if I'm being technical, the game sims are already done and
Are
have
already
been
done.
given to solver.
Yes.
But as far as the game sims go, without giving away too much, there's
Don't give
different
away
ways
too
you
much.
can
Just
do it.
explain it like I'm an
Yeah.
idiot.
It's kind of like we don't do like a full play-by-play sim one at a time.
Okay.
Like in terms of like, this was the kickoff. This is 1st and 10.
That is
We're
literally what I'm asking. Yeah.
we're not getting that granular. I think SaberSim does. I think what we do is sort of like in between, where we're like simulating all the offensive plays in a game, like all at once, I guess, is the so there are individual plays, but it's happening all at once. And we know like the correlations between, if Miami scores this many points and has this pass rate, well, then that's going to change the distribution for how many plays Cleveland runs and what their pass rate is going to be. So you kind of that's sort of how it works. Um, and there's like lots of different elements of it. The target share stuff's pretty straightforward. We simulate, T. Higgins has a 22% target share. There's a distribution off of that as to what are the odds that it's like actually 22% versus something else. You kind of randomly simulate that. You do that for all the receivers, and you get all the targets added up to the pass attempts. And then
So
for each
that
target, you're simulating what happened on each target. And
so that is like in my mind, obviously, like the simple version of that makes a ton of sense. You simulate what happens over 10,000 games for a wide receiver with this team total against the number 7 DVOA like defense over, and you can get a what I guess like a Gaussian distribution of what is likely to happen with those inputs. The play level stuff, I mean, that is just like, dude, that is
This is
straight
where
up
it gets
science
complex. And this is where
science fiction to me.
I think we're able to handle the correlations well, because it's not like, oh, QB1 is correlated to wide receiver 1 like this amount. Like, we're actually simulating based on, the tendency of the teams and like having it all line up. So, a quarterback who runs a lot, the correlation is going to be different than, Joe Burrow to T. Higgins. And we're not feeding that in. We're not telling it what correlation to use. The correlations are happening organically, which is like the opposite of what I told you I was doing Showdown, which I was like, hey, make it match these correlations. This is the opposite. This is the correlations are organically stemming from the way that we're simulating the game.
I mean, how do you... I don't know shit about math. It's like unbelievable. How do you go about...
to be clear, the amount that I understand our sim is probably way lower than you think it is. We've got a few really sharp guys. Works on it. It's just
that's so funny, Leone. In this equation, you're the football guy. Like
that's like my job now. As we've hired people, I'm like the go between. Between like these other people that play the games and have the domain knowledge and know football, and all our data science guys have domain knowledge too, and some of them play a lot. But I'm kind of like the tweener guy of like, does this make sense or not? And then you figure out the math. The math is above my head, quite frankly.
Right. That's so funny. Just because the public perception of Michael Leone at establishtheRun.com would be that you are the pencil pusher. That you are the guy who is you're the spreadsheet socialist. You're the guy who can't give up on Kyle Pitts.
I'm pencil pushing like little differences where I think the model's not picking up on something. But right now, the person who's making that model is somebody else, not me, based off input from me and the whole team as how that model should work. But I'm not the one who's training and executing that model that initially gives us like what CJ Stroud's pass rate should be or whatever.
How much of your how much are you having to deal with people who are criticizing your projections? Like, how much of it is like of your day to day or your week to week is like people being like, idiot, like how could you possibly think that Trey Benson's going to get 4 points when he should get 2 points?
Not that much anymore, quite frankly. Like, I'm almost, this is gonna sound bad, like I'm almost too busy to like be chasing down that commentary and stuff. It's not like the good old days when Drew and I ran like daily fantasy rundown and we'd get emails if the projections didn't go well one night and would have to explain them. So I mean, some of that happens internally in terms of like our ETR team members don't agree.
Yeah, that's my favorite is Wiggins is Wiggins in our secret chat being like, yeah, I told Leone this projection's way off.
Dude, Wiggins will just come in super hot out of nowhere, and then he's like, "Why are you guys pushing back against me?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't. This wasn't the best way to start this exchange."
Well,
but, no, we it's good though because Wiggins, the people that play the games are able to spot. Like, I don't know if you realize we have this position in the market. Like, we have a heavy stand here. Let's just make sure it's intentional and it's right, going back to what we were talking about before. So Wiggins is very good at that because he's very aware of what our projections are and the market projections are. I will say some stuff that's hard. Like, we joke around that Hoops Discord chat in...
Oh, they're not going to like that you dox them, bro.
Sorry. But like sometimes I see stuff in there and it's very funny with the ETR projections because it's like kind of people ripping on them, but using them, like you said, but what's hard sometimes is like they're a lot of times playing different games. Like, our main thing is like props and DFS stuff. So like sometimes we'll have, I'm just using them as an example, but it's not just, we'll have something. It's just hard to keep track of everything. So like we have the Battle Royale rankings, and like sometimes those are like probably not exactly what they should be for Battle Royale because it's not it's not like somebody's manually doing battle royale rankings at every hour of the day. You know what I mean? Like, it's just stemming from the flow of all our other stuff.
Well, I did want to talk to you about the battle royale stuff, because that was actually what got me thinking, like, this would be less you and this would be more Drew and Mike, the other Mike, Michael Gallagher, of like, do they realize that their opinions on like what Dennis Schroeder is going to do on a given night is literally swinging hundreds of thousands of dollars? Like, it's just so funny that, like, cause like before you guys, and I don't know what people are doing now, but before you guys actually straight up released the rankings, like with Underdog player IDs and stuff, most people's processes was effectively some kind of random number generation with the ETR NBA projections, and they do this every night in every slate. And it's like obviously some people, like, they bake in some ADP, maybe they use Saber NBA projections, but like, everything, everyone universally acknowledges that Drew and Mike's stuff is the best for NBA. And it's like, that's kind of a crazy amount of responsibility. Like, people are just straight
Right.
up automatoning, no thought, just copy pasting and just running with it.
That's what's hard too, because like for DFS, we have to get everything right by a certain time, but we've got some leeway in terms of getting it right by that. The battle royale stuff's difficult because it's got to be right, like, basically all the time
As you're drafting.
So that, and because people are right, people are drafting whenever. So that's definitely difficult. I'd like us to, at some point, figure something out with someone who's really good at that stuff that can come in and kind of be a go-between. Because it's just impossible for us to be like 100% on top. And then the other thing too is, like, our rankings are very good in terms of, like, if you wanted automated rankings from projections, I think they're probably the best out there. But
Oh, for
there's
sure.
elements of that game in terms of like ownership, the injury stuff, especially in NBA, is massive, where like you actually, want to take a player that's going to be out so that you can sub in a player that's like eventually going to arise, and like you're almost intentionally taking that zero to like be able to sub it out. So
Yes.
like there's elements of that are not baked into our rankings at all. And that's what's tough for football too, is like we used to kind of like, with injuries, kind of wait till Friday. Now we're a lot more proactive in terms of our trying to get the guess right, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Because we used to not want to be like, oh, we're
I
going to
was gonna
move
say,
this guy
I've noticed that
in.
this year. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want to move a guy in and then take him out and then move him in. Like, we used to not want to do that redundant work because it was just a waste of our time. But now, between props and the battle royale stuff, we do try to get that stuff right. We're more proactive about making an actual guess, rather than we used to kind of just say, let's default to what happened last week and we'll wait till Friday and see what the practice reports did.
Yeah. So how much are you involved with the battle royale stuff for NFL? Like, in terms of the rankings, or is that below your pay
So
grade these days?
I just set it up before we were on this show. Like, I set it up at the beginning on Thursdays to kind of take in the ADP and like make sure some of our like positional scarcity stuff makes sense. But then from there on, it's just every time our sim runs or our projections update, that stuff's automatically updating based off that. So no one's going in there saying like, ooh, I think Josh Allen should be like 2 and not 3 based on like draft dynamics. Like, no one's doing that. It's purely based on the combination of the sim and the base projections.
Yeah. Which, like, so 1 week I just wanted to try it. I want to say maybe week 10 or something. I just uploaded the normally I do my own.
What did you blind
But
auto?
no, I didn't blind auto, but I, instead of using ADP as like the guide, I'd use the ETR ranks as the guide. Just like, because there's this very strange psychology. I mean, maybe this is only me because I'm a simpleton, but there's this really interesting psychology that happens when you're in a draft applet, that the way that the players are
For
listed has an
sure.
impact on how you prefer them. Like, Underdog, FFP, like, just, I'm thinking like seasonal drafts. Like, you guys always do the abusing the default rankings. Levitan has always loved that. But like, just having the players in a different order is going to influence how much you want to click them. It's inarguable. So it's like, I'll just try it 1 week. And maybe you have no insight on this because you haven't thought about it. But one thing I did notice, and I have noticed in checking the rankings every week, is that you guys are much higher on tight ends in those games. Like, just
Yes, I
very,
know that too.
way, and obviously there's some sort of VORP, value over replacement thing that is happening there. But I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I need to look at that closer. I think there might be an element of like, I think our sim is pretty good. We
Sure.
overall for these types of things. And I'm trying to pull it up now to look at it a little bit closer. But generally those guys have a much higher chance of like the top tight ends, like their odds of being in the optimal lineup,
Are
if you
so
were
much
to
higher.
run a blind optimal, are so much higher. There's an element that I don't know if we're capturing correctly where those points maybe, if they're technically optimal, they might not be picking up. Like when Justin Jefferson's optimal, he's scoring a ton of points, Brock Bowers might be optimal and only scoring like, 15 points or something that
And
we're not
so
capturing fully correctly. But I
there's
will
there's
say like,
also another weird thing with tight ends that all the good ones have shitty quarterbacks. So and
yeah,
the
I
and
mean,
the
that's
and the
like factored in, but yeah.
sure. But the bar, like you said, I think it's that the bar is lower. I think it's that 18 points is optimal at tight end like a lot of the time, and 18 points at wide receiver is like never optimal. Maybe it will be this
The,
week because it's such a shitty slate, but
the I would say though, we've had like two different ways. Like we kind of our battle royale rankings are like a combination of a few different rankings done individually. So one is like the sim by itself and like messing with like odds of being optimal and flex to try and get a good sense. And then another ranking just straight like value over replacement player based on our base projection. And both of them have the tight ends usually quite a bit higher than the market. I feel like it hasn't turned out great in practice this year, just on field, but um, yeah, I think there would be something to look more into like draft dynamics of like, exactly what you might be getting later. Um, the opportunity cost stuff might not be captured like perfectly the way we're doing it.
well, I mean, it's like anything else. Like someone who's really deep inside the game, there's just like, kind of latent knowledge and skills and feel that you get. Feel maybe is not the right word, but you just are going to be better at the game from playing it more often. I also wanted to talk to you about that. How has your DFS playing changed? Because I mean, you were used to play NBA every night, used to 150
Huh.
Major League Baseball. Like what is your DFS menu like now?
I'm pretty much only playing NFL and then donking off golf majors. And then once in a while for NBA, if for some reason I have like a really clean night and I know I can stay on top of late swap, I'll do like a low stakes MME stuff and like just rerun stuff after every lock period. I did that a couple times the opening week, but I haven't played much since then. Um, but yeah, it's mostly NFL. I try to play one really high stakes, usually the Thunderdome, a week, and then make like 3 to 5 lineups in total each week. Uh, I'd like to MME more in NFL. I do for sometimes some of the 2-gamer slates or off slates. The main slate, I feel like I haven't figured out using our sim the best way to like manage the full portfolio. So I'd like to figure that out. I know a lot of the top players have that pretty much figured out before I do more of that.
What do you mean? What do you mean portfolio? Like how the
Like,
teams function together?
yeah, like let's say I found 1,000 lineups that are really good in
Yeah.
terms of sim ROI. What's the best 150 to play? It's probably not the top 150 blindly. There's probably a point at which this lineup's cannibalizing this lineup. You're actually better playing, one of these lower down lineups type of thing. And I until I get that figured out better, I've been hesitant to MME the main slates.
Yeah, that's I mean, look, that's very interesting. That is stuff that you're Joe Sixpack is not thinking about how lineups cannibalize against one each other.
I mean, it's tough. It's tough out there. You got to get
It's tough.
you want your
No, it's
money to
hard.
be in good if you're, so
Yeah, the games are tougher. I mean, I think like most something I've really been trying to make a conscious effort of this year is other than like nut running backs, like other than like Chase Brown or Jameer Gitt, like guys who are in like really nutted spots, is actually just be like crazy diversified. Have like play like 10 teams with like no overlapping players other than like the stone value guys of a
yeah.
given week.
I think what's been hard for me sometimes is like using a combination of my feel and the Sims, it might be like last week's a good example. It was like, oh, you should really like Jamar Chase is one of the best plays of the week. And then it's like, okay, I make one Chase team. Do I like double down on that stand with Chase on like my second primary team and have a different stack around it? Or do I want to like, and that kind of goes to the portfolio management thing too, but even like on a smaller set of teams, like you see where the edge is. Not that it's necessarily a high probability of hitting, but if it hits, like the
If it
path is like
hits.
somewhat clearer as, in terms of what it takes to win. And it's like, yeah, and that's where it's difficult to know, like, usually more times than not, I might be less diversified because less diverse. I kind of want to attack that path that seems like the best way to win that week, even if it's fragile. And then if I lose, I lose.
All right. We got to talk about the best ball market from 2024. Not the year of the ship chaser until it was, until
Until then again.
and then it was. Isn't that so funny? It's week 15, all the Henry Barkley teams die, and then the Henry Barkley teams that got through I'd like to see an alternative history where Kamara doesn't get injured because he was such a that is when I think of a Michael Leone pick, I couldn't think any more of and you might not have even had that much of him, but I just can't think anything more of this guy who's going to get 300 touches on a team that plays in a dome, has no good backups, like in the 8th round or whatever, and probably James Conner. I don't even know, but I'm assuming.
Dude, I was tilting Sunday so hard because I had 6 teams in the semis and they were all pretty good. And it total order of events bias, but I had Connor on my best 2 teams.
Yeah.
And like I looked like for a second there, like I might get 2 teams through, really good chance of getting 1. And then Connor gets hurt and has like a good week, but like how it is in best play. I mean, every point above 24 matters like so much more when you start to separate. So that's frustrating. I didn't end up getting a team into the finals. I had a couple teams that finished like 3rd or 4th.
So I suppose what's the right, basically, the year of the boomer, the year of Barkley, the year of Henry. I mean, do you think they're truly from a data theory perspective, is it just, sometimes seasons play out this way, wide receivers get injured and running backs don't? Do you think it was misreading the market, that it was a terrible running back rookie class, and so all these veterans signing big free agent deals should have been a big tell? Do you think it was, underdog drafters basically just lost their minds with Waddle and Olave? Like, kind of what is your takeaway of the results?
I mean, as usual, like it's a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super boring, but I do think like for myself, I think I like double counted some stuff with like Barkley early, where it was like our projections on Barkley when we boosted his efficiency based on like the team switch, like we didn't have him that far off ADP. And I was like kind of like overly scared of like telling people to draft Barkley because of structural stuff, but it spit out. I do think, this is probably reframing things to like make it sound like my approach is a good approach. So I'm like aware of that, and I don't.
No, please,
need,
Leone,
but, like,
pound your fucking chest. 6 semifinal teams, brother.
I do think there's an element of like at a certain point you need to have like a baseline projection value over replacement or whatever that you don't want to like triple IKB, because of structural reasons. You know what I mean? Like at some point a play is just a good, like I ended up with double digit Derrick Henry and we were on Underdog because of that reason, right? Like it wasn't like I wanted to draft Derrick Henry. I'm like old running back who doesn't catch the football. Like I don't want to draft Derrick Henry, but like at a certain point I just couldn't now wave the projections enough, So I do think there's an element of like it's a field game, but you want to have a little bit of both. Like you want to be anchored to something that's a little bit more objective, and then that lets you run into these outcomes. And then I know you give me crap about the spread out exposures and not being
I wish I could trade with you. I would trade to have 16% or 8% of every guy I liked instead of what I ended up having.
But I do think, and like looking at some of the stuff Dan Zach did last year and some of the sim stuff I've done in the past, that like a year like this, while this was like a mega outlier, wasn't like totally crazy that running backs would smash. So if you're just drafting like ADP value early, not strictly ADP value early, but if you're willing to take some big ADP values early, you can end up with a portfolio of teams that just has like all different structures. And then you're making those structures probably better than the casual player. So no matter how the season breaks out, you're probably going to do better than the field. That probably takes off the table a season where you've just absolutely smashed because you picked all the right players and you've picked the exact right structure. But like, I think you could pretty consistently have an advance rate above average if you're willing to like be creative in terms of how you put those ADP values together. Like I didn't draft nearly enough Barkley, but my Barkley teams were pretty good. Like I drafted them correctly when I did take him. I do think though that like just going back to running backs versus receivers, it's hard in hindsight to be like, yeah, Waddle and Olave over Barkley was good. Like that's probably
I
not
think it was
right.
probably hard to justify at the time. Like if you would have asked me, why are you taking Chris Olave instead of Saquon Barkley in June, I probably wouldn't have had a particularly convincing answer for you, other than
And
I
to be
don't want to
clear,
get
I
buried
did
by
that.
the
Like that one in
Avalanche.
particular, I was like I got a lot of Henry in the next round, but like I took a ton of Josh Jacobs and I kind of made those teams, but I did not take much Barkley. So I was definitely drafting Olave. And I was like so afraid of like being behind on receiver. But I think that there was a stretch of where we interpreted for 3 straight seasons everything that happened to like, well, you got to draft more receivers
Got to
early.
draft more receivers.
At a certain point, maybe there was like a top signal in that, like when you're twisting, like, first it was like the running backs are going too early, so you got to fade them because they're just not good picks going that early. And then it was like, well, the running backs aren't going too early, but now that everybody's drafting receivers, now you got to draft
Now
receivers.
you got to draft receivers.
And there are elements of both of those things that were true, to be clear, but it probably the field went too far and then just got hit with like probably the most unlucky season that you imaginable for that to happen. So
seven wide receivers drafted in the top 50 picks, season-ending IR. The only
yeah,
running back,
I mean that's just
the
bad
only
luck.
running back to go on season-ending IR in the top 150 picks was Zach Moss and Marshawn Lloyd. I guess he was probably close to top 150, which is but
the
also
injury rates aren't that different between running back and receiver, though. I think that's something that's been overplayed. And then obviously there's more receivers being drafted in the top 150 than running backs, so it's more likely that more receivers are going to get hurt than running backs early. But it was still broke, like super crazy, extreme in terms of the amount of early running backs, with the exception of CMC, that had injury issues were pretty very light, like the lightest maybe we've ever had.
I don't want to be one of these idiot losers. It's like, I ran so bad. It's so annoying that Rashee Rice got hurt. I could have won so much money. Like, that is not productive to me, and it's not going to help me win money in the future. What I am more interested in is how this impacts decision making moving forward. Because obviously the cope has been, oh, dude, everyone's going to learn the wrong lesson. Derrick Henry's going to be a first round. That's not happening. You could just get that. You get that out of your mind right now. It's not happening. No thought leader, no influencer is going to make that their strategy. You're going to have these like long Sean Siegel diatribes where he explains how Josh Jacobs was actually terrible the whole time and he was a silent killer in fantasy, even in his best career season. Henry's going to be 31. Barkley's going to be 28. The Eagles will probably end up having like a disappointing end to the season where Jalen Hurts can't get any first downs in a playoff game. Like, the market next year, it's so funny, Mike, because on Underdog, what's happened is every year the market gets more insane. Like each year for the last 3 years, the market's gone more insane and more insane. I think probably what'll happen is it'll be a holding pattern. I think drafts this upcoming year will look a lot like they did in 2024. Instead of like, there's not like the wide receiver avalanche will still be there, but it won't be like, and the first 24 picks were all wide receivers in this Best Ball 95 draft I did.
I think we'll probably rightfully be a little more hesitant on the receivers that we're not sure if they're really good yet. But
the wide receiver twos.
Yeah. It's tough though because like I don't know. I'll probably draft Devontae Smith and those guys like pretty early again. The running backs that really hit that people weren't taking though were 4 running backs that all went to new teams, and it's kind of like, oh, in hindsight, it's like, well, we like to chase uncertainty. There was a chance this could have worked out good between Mixon, Jacobs,
Yeah.
Barkley, and Henry. I mean, they all went to new situations, and they all went to favorable situations.
That's was definitely an underlooked part. Yeah.
So it's like, I would take the unders on the efficiency on Henry and Barkley next year for sure, based on what they did this, relative to this year. But there is a little bit in hindsight of like we only looked at like the bear case and not the bull cases for those. And I know
I
Henry
mean,
in particular, I would have been, Levitan was right that they would, like, I was like worried they were gonna like not give him like a crazy full workload, which in
yeah,
hindsight looks really stupid. And
well,
Levitan
it
pushed us
depends.
on there.
It depends on how you define full workload. I mean, he's played about half the snaps, which is kind of what he's always done. It's just he just
Yeah, but
gets
in terms of the carries, I mean, when they get into those games, they have no problem getting them 20 plus carries or whatever. Or maybe not 20 plus, but like close to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, like, if Barkley is actually the first overall pick next year, um, that seems not great to me. It doesn't really.
Agreed. Well, you did see, you know, having played DFS, like you've seen the Barkley and Henry failures, like on a week to week basis of like why they weren't top picks. It just we underaccounted for those ceiling weeks and like
Well,
how
and
big they
and
would be.
scoring in general is lower. Like just scoring is down because there's so many horrible teams. Like that is also maybe something that'll be different in the NFL next year. Like right now, we are maybe you're listening to this in the future, but right now, Leone and I are recording this before week 17. There are 9 NFL teams with 4 or fewer wins. I mean, that is like insane bifurcation. That's like what happens in the NBA. You don't see like San Francisco's 6-9, dude. I mean, it's just there's just been so many bad teams. Uh and if the 49ers are better next year, the Bears are better, the Jets are better, the Titans are better, like they're just it's just all kind of looks a little bit different. And I mean, wide receiver scoring taking a significant dip while all these running backs smashed, particularly in half PPR. It like Justin Jefferson having the worst points per game year of his career while every running back goes nuts is just kind of like a crazy confluence of things.
Yeah, it's a crazy confluence, and I guess that's one. It was a crazy outlier year, but two, the point I was trying to make with like talking about like I did sim stuff a few years ago with best ball. I want to re-up and do it better. I know Dan Zach's done sim stuff, but like people who have done that have found that there are these running back early builds that are pretty good. So there's also a chance that that stuff ran bad for a few years, with all the data that we had for BBM and stuff in terms of like not taking running backs and whatnot too early. And I know like looking at it last year for the manifesto, like a big element of it was more, you didn't want to be caught behind at receiver, but it wasn't that the running back picks were necessarily bad in and of
Bad.
themselves.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of things, but I don't think it should be written off fully as an outlier, I guess, just because I know that sim stuff in the back of my head. I know the way I did that was like organic and correct. And it told me that like you can draft, X running backs early and be fine if you do it in an intelligent manner. So I don't want to just totally say that this past year was an outlier because I don't think that's completely true. I mean, it was an outlier for sure, but that doesn't mean
Doesn't mean
that you should
that
totally write off the things that
exactly.
happened.
Yeah. It'll be kind of interesting because the free agent running backs this year are terrible. It's like Najee Harris and Aaron Jones. So it'll be interesting to see what the market, although it's a very good rookie running back class. What's a good lesson to learn? Here is a good lesson to learn. Marvin Harrison Jr. felt like a bad 1-2 turn pick at the time and got worse every week. It felt worse every continual week. Maybe rookie wide receivers just like, well, let's call them top 25 picks maybe. I don't know. Or maybe that's too reactionary
I don't know.
because
I kind of like thought Marv was fine at the 1-2 turn. Like it wasn't a great turn. He was, by all accounts, one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen. He had the worst rookie season by far of any comparable wide receiver prospect we've seen. Like
Yeah.
if Malik Neighbors went at the 1-2 turn, people wouldn't be like, "Oh, that was an awful pick."
Malik Neighbors fewer touchdowns than Xavier Worthy, so maybe they would. Maybe they would say they should have just taken a different rookie wide receiver at the 1-2 turn.
If Neighbors was playing with a good quarterback, for example, he would have been an absolute smash as a 1-2 turn pick. You know what I mean? Like as a rookie. Like, so I don't think you can use I don't know. It was a miss, but like, honestly, that's one there's a lot that I feel bad about. I don't feel that bad about that one, which I know probably sounds crazy, but.
Well, here's why. I guess here's why I think it seems a little bit crazy. They're not crazy. The reason it was a bad 1-2 turn. There was just a lot of uncertainty. Like Jahmyr Gibbs in a timeshare, Puka Nacua is banged up, and he's playing with Cooper Kupp, and Deebo Samuel is 28, and Nico Collins blew up for 6 games last year, but like was a bad player before that, and Barkley's on a new team, and Brees. It was a bad turn, so it felt pretty easy to push him up there. But I think particularly in the first round, like with these super premium picks, there probably is a little bit. Well, maybe this is just fear-based decision-making on my part of thinking like things that we can actually measure should be emphasized more at the high end, as opposed to really courting that input volatility that you can with middle and late round selections. I don't know. Maybe that's too conservative of me.
I think the Harrison, I think he was like I don't think he was a great 1-2 turn pick, but I don't think it was like the worst thing. I think where I kind of, some people in the market that were like even higher on Harrison had like this end of season argument that didn't totally jive with me in terms of like you needed Harrison to be an alpha from day one. You know what I mean? Like if you're taking him there, you're not taking him because he's going to like do a lot better the second half of the season. You were taking him because you want him to have the Malik Neighbors route, which was like he just smashed from essentially go.
He did. I mean, yeah, and could have had a giga mega smash with any kind of competent quarterback play. I mean, I don't know. I probably will do a little bit more portfolio based drafting next year. Well, just a little, like, I don't know.
You're gonna seesaw back, and now all your big stands that you would have taken would have hit.
No, because I think my big stands. I mean, honestly, like Worthy looks great. Chase Brown is like the pick of the year. Like it would have been okay. I mean, the thing that killed me was I missed out on every league winner to keep taking Mahomes and Kelsey, who are like literally some of the worst picks in the whole pool.
One thing too, you were joking a bit about like how the Barkley Henry drafters all lost in week 15 or whatever, and now they're back.
They're so bad.
There's an element of like, even if you now the best player of the season, he has one bad week and you're like, I think people still understate the amount of variance it takes with these 3 non-consecutive, the 3 starting from scratch playoff weeks.
The guy who advanced the most teams in the whole field did not have a semifinal team.
Right. And like, I think to me, that's probably like I think being able to get a lot of diversified teams into the playoff route is like probably pretty good.
Yes.
Now, obviously, like I don't know, maybe in the end it nets out the same, but I just think that I guess the broader point is the variance is absolutely insane, and I think a lot of people focus on like how they can win the playoff weeks, and it's so random, and it's like, and people like use the randomness to like make points about like, oh, the year Josh Jacobs smashed, he sucked in the playoffs, didn't go, so he was a bad pick. And it's like, he wasn't a bad pick. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. The variance of the contest is just utterly insane, which doesn't mean it's not plus EV and there's not skill in getting there, whatnot. It just means
you have to accept the randomness.
Yeah, you want to figure out the ways to take advantage of the randomness and not like trick yourself into thinking like, oh, it's so I don't know. I feel like sometimes people take the wrong lesson from the randomness when I hear about.
I think the correct lesson is you should not always pair the same players. Like you can have huge stands. Like, I mean, this is Sacrilegious wrote a great article about this, but it's like,
he did. I really liked his article.
You can have 38% Xavier Worthy, but then you shouldn't also do Drake May with that guy every time. You should have some Baker Mayfield, Jalen McMillan. And you can't have your A start, your B middle, and your C ending. Sometimes you need to do your C start, your A middle, and your D ending. You need to be layering them in so that you don't need the same thing from each combination of 18 individual players, like that, so that you can sneak some teams through, even if you're a guy. So let's say you advance 50 teams and they all have Saquon Barkley, so that if Barkley gets 9, you can still maybe squeak through 2 teams or whatever.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you want to be diversified in terms of the combinations, regardless of how high your max exposure is to players. You can still have diversified teams in
Yes.
combinations.
All right, let's talk a little bit about running, Michael, because you're a big runner. You run outdoors in the Buffalo winter. Did you run like cross country in high school? How did you become a runner? Are you a Goggins acolyte? Do you have special shoes? Do you have like electrolyte gel? What's your
So,
history with running?
all right. So I ran in high school. I was, as a kid, I was very small, but like very competitive and like pretty good at sports in grade school. But when I got to high school, I didn't really want to play soccer for whatever reason. And my mom's like, well, you have to do something. And I'm glad she made me do something, because I would have just been like, nope, I'm going to do nothing. So I did cross country and then was like fairly good at it. I do regret not being better at it. It's one of those things. Our coach that we had that was really good left like halfway through, and I wish I had him. And like back then they didn't do like more organized training over the summer, and I just didn't like love running, so I didn't train over the summer the way I should have. So I was long story short, I was okay in high school. My junior year I scored for us when we won the championship, but I was like the 5th guy that scored, like literally the last guy that scored for the team.
It's pretty cool.
I was fairly good, but not like amazing. Had no thoughts of running in college. So then I didn't run at all in college. Ran a half marathon in my 20s somewhere, but didn't train super hard for it. And like just kind of was doing it to be able to finish. And then when I turned 30 and my son was born, I was like, all right, I got to get my ish together after like 5 years of like playing DFS nonstop and like doing no physical activity. So I signed up for a half marathon. I like actually got like joined a run club, and the woman who runs it does coaching too. So I did that. And so I'm 38 now. So this was like 8 years ago. So that's when I started to get like real back into it. And then the last few years have been kind of like finding the ultra and the trail running super intriguing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, have you run an ultra marathon?
I've done one ultra. It was
tell the people what an ultra marathon is, because they probably don't know.
It's technically any distance longer than a marathon distance. A lot of times though, ultras, it doesn't have to be. There are like road ultras and stuff, but a lot of times they're trail races too. So I did a trail ultra in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's called the MST 100. I did the 50K version, which ended up, they're like, oh, it's actually a couple miles longer. I think it was like 33 miles. That was a fun first ultra to do. It was absolutely downpouring the whole time.
Sick.
I was running through mud, and it was a lot of fun for like half of it, where I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is what I'm doing. And then it was like a turnaround. So then when you went back the second time, it was like even sloppier. And it was, and my strategy, which a lot of like early, beginning ultra runners do, is like walk all the uphills and then run everything else. And that became difficult because it was so muddy that like you couldn't, it was harder. So anyways, it dragged on, but it was still a good first experience. I've signed up for a 50-mile race in Sonoma. It's called the Sonoma 50, that I'm very worried and excited about in April, that I'm running.
That's
that one
Sonoma,
has
Arizona.
In California. So it's around Lake Sonoma.
So it's not hot. I mean, it'll be hot, but it's not going to be like 100 degrees.
It's not gonna be 100 degrees, but it's gonna sneak up on you, because it just, even 65 middle of the day, there's a lot of so there's 10,000 feet of elevation over the course of the race, not net, but
That's
Like you're
crazy.
not gaining 10,000 feet and you're coming down 10,000 feet as well as going up 10,000 feet over the course, but that's still a lot. It's like 200 feet per mile on average. So that's the part that I'm worried about, because we don't have hills here in Buffalo. So I have to figure out some ways to train for that.
What do you listen to?
I listened to, so when I ran my race, I didn't listen to anything. I did nothing
That
when I
is
ran my race.
that is
When
nuts, Michael.
when I go to run club, a lot of the times I won't really listen to anything either. When I run on my own from my house or like go on a trail run, I listen to audiobooks. I'm very rarely listen to music. I'm almost always audiobooks, once in a while a podcast.
I can't believe you ran a 33-mile race with nothing in your ears.
Just trying to be in it, man.
I mean,
You also like when you're trail running too, like you got to be.
You have to be aware.
One, I don't want to get lost on this race on the trail, which would be very bad to like go off course. Like it'd be pretty easy to go off course.
Yeah.
And two, like you got to watch where your feet are a little bit more. Now, I listen to audiobook when I trail run, so like you can do it, but you gotta be a little bit more aware. And I was just trying to kind of like take in the experience. It was also pouring rain, so like I don't want to deal with headphones in that situation.
How long did it take you?
Like 8 hours. It was like 14 something pace. It was like not very fast at all, but we got it done. We got the job done.
How did you feel afterwards? Did you feel like that was what I expected it to be? I feel really accomplished. That was awesome. Or were you like, fine?
I felt very accomplished, and it was what I expected it to be.
That's sick. You know, very few things in life are like that, where when you look forward to something and then you do it and you get a feeling of joy and satisfaction when it's complete. Most of the time, you get a very fleeting sense of joy and satisfaction, and then you're like, all right, well, what's next? Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe that's more me.
No, I mean, I definitely get that feeling with things, but this one was, well, like I said, like it's kind of like the rain and stuff. Even though it was annoying, it was like kind of part of the experience and everything. So, and I'm just like on. You mentioned David Goggins. I'm not definitely not a Goggins follower, because he's a little too.
I love him.
Because
I'm so soft, Michael. I am so soft. I need someone to yell at me and tell me I'm soft.
I like Steve Magnus. I follow a lot, and he wrote this book called Do Hard Things. But he talks about like toughness being like aware of like when you should stop and like not be an idiot. Whereas Goggins is just kind of like, no matter what, you should do this. It's got to be all like, it doesn't have to, you want it to do really hard things, but that doesn't mean you have to like put yourself through pain and suffering like 24 hours a day.
Right.
You know, so that's where I feel like Goggins like doesn't send the best message.
Do hard things. All right, I'll read. Do hard. I love a good self-help book, man. Boy, do I love a good self-help book.
The other one that I'm reading right now is The Comfort Crisis, that I haven't finished, but that one's good too.
I mean, I assume the thesis there is our life is too goddamn easy. All we do is eat food that's delicious and look at our nice soothing screens, and we're around our loved ones all the time. And life's easy.
Exactly. And it's about the one guy, I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, that he talks about does these misogis. It's a Japanese word, but they're like rituals. So like once a year they'll do one, and like I think their thing is like whatever you do, it's got to be around like a 50-50 chance you'll actually succeed, and just do something really hard. So and it can be different per person. The idea is the idea is now there were some parts I didn't like Bob was explaining, like because for me, like I want to train and get to the point where like I'm greater than 50-50, you know what I mean? But like the idea is that like, you know, failing for like getting comfortable with failure is good, but also just doing these things like that like truly get you out of your comfort zone.
I mean, it's hard to do that. See, I'm in a spot now where training is in my comfort zone. Like it's actually more out of my comfort zone to like not lift. So it's like that has become not easy, but it's like I know what I'm doing. I go in, I move my weights around, it's fine. So I'm kind of looking at,
do you do any lifting competitions or anything?
No, because I'm not that strong.
Yeah, but dude, see, like that's a good thing to do though. Like, what's the worst? I mean, you don't need to win to do it. You know,
No,
push
that's true.
yourself.
It's like I have like I can bench press
Get out of the comfort
225,
zone, man.
but I can't bench press like 300. I can't
It
squat
doesn't matter.
500 pounds.
They don't. They'll let you compete. You might come in
That
last.
I think I'd be very embarrassed to get in a leotard and come up and like deadlift like half of what the guy in front of me deadlifts.
Uh-huh.
But no, I think actually for me an endurance cardio based thing is like much more difficult because
Yeah.
I get so bored because my brain is so dopamine, feed me serotonin. I need a screen. I need a thing. I need the next thing,
Yeah.
you know? Uh,
Well,
so that's very
there's
difficult for me.
there's an element of you said it was crazy like that I ran without headphones or anything. Like there's an element of like doing that once in a while is like good for your brain too. Of like
Oh,
this is
yeah.
what we're doing. Deal with it. Like focus on what you don't need to be distracted. I mean, I can't do that all the time. There's definitely times I need to be distracted, but kind of with the comfort stuff, there's a good level of like you should be bored once in a while.
You should be bored a lot. You should be bored every day for some period. It's very just evolutionary. Evolutionarily, it makes no sense for our brains to be entertained. Peter Attia talks about that when he does his rucking. He said, "No phone, no phone, no headphones. You put you go out and go walk for an hour with your weighted pack on. Come home,
Mm-hmm.
you're tired, you feel good. It's just like a nice little reset, which I could do. I don't think I will because I need to max enter the primetime hurry up 3 on Underdog Fantasy, and that's not going to do itself.
I'm so bad with my phone though. Still, that's one
Yeah.
that could be. I mean, I'm sure you've done episodes. You've talked with Mayo
That's a
about that,
whole
right?
that's a whole yeah, I mean, look, we could do I should get someone who wrote one of these books about phone addiction on and then be like, "Don't look inside my brain, please. Please don't do what
The
it's
thing is, though, you're a lot more normal than you think you are with that stuff, which is not a good thing for
No,
for society at large. But
well,
you focus so hard on yourself.
I don't have Instagram or TikTok on my phone. The short form videos, the 60-second videos, and you just sit and you scroll, and it's like I just don't have because if I had it on my phone, I would do nothing else. I would lose hours to these
Yeah,
things. So I just straight up don't have it on my phone because
yeah.
fuck.
I used to have TikTok, and it sucks because there, like, every once in a while, you would see like a video where you legitimately like
You get something great.
either laughed or were like received some piece of information that was actually like impactful, but the net exchange of time was not good. So
Yeah,
I ended up getting rid of that too.
yeah. All right, Mike. Let's get out of here. Do you have anything? Would you like to tell the people about Establish the Edge? I was Googling around for a thumbnail. I was like, what can Michael come on
Nah,
to promote?
I think we might just end up combining everything onto the ETR podcast next year. So Establish the Edge is the podcast that I was doing kind of more of the nerdier episodes that weren't ready for mainstream ETR yet.
Patrick Barnes'
But
YouTube said that can go on the main channel.
I don't know exactly what the plan is. We got to figure out. It's also been hard, since we got these data science people I talked about in the beginning. I just haven't had the time to like do it. So I did a lot of Establish the Edge stuff in the off season, but I didn't do anything in season this
In
year. So
season.
it's that the status of the ET is up in the air.
Status of ET is up in the air.
Sad.
Used to be Corain used to come on and then he
It
got
was his
rich.
thing. That's yeah.
Yeah, and then Corain, won $2 million over it.
Classic.
Sad to see Pat Corain win $2 million. It's gonna be even more sad to see what Chess Liam does when he defends his best ball
I
mania
think if
crown.
Liam wins, I think we may have to like resign from public fantasy life. It might be it. It might just be game over.
I do a weekly show with Liam. It'll find a way to be good for me. If somehow I'll make someone else winning $1.5 million good for me. All right, boys. Everyone, make sure that you are checking out ETR. And so actually, do you want to talk about the new solver draft tool? I've not used it yet. Because I use the draft caddy, but do you want to talk about the new tool? Were you a part of that or no?
I wasn't too much a part of that. I think I will be working on like the algorithm for helping that tool, which you can use on the Underdog to like kind of. It's like an interactive draft guide and rankings, and then gives you some information in terms of highlighting like
I
stacks and things like that.
I'm fascinated with the real-time assistant tools for these games because I think they're all missing something, you know? But it's
Yeah.
like eventually real-time assistant stuff got really good for No Limit Hold'em, which is like a more complex game than what we're playing, you know, in a lot of ways. So I'm very curious.
The
I'm also curious
playoff
to see
best
if
ball,
people, yeah, playoff best ball is
the
pretty easy.
playoff best ball one is like really hard to do an algorithm for, or at least a simple one, because
Well, I
there's
thought it
so
would be
many.
easy.
No, there's so many layers to it though, in terms of like, okay, are you assuming this team's the 1 seed or the 2 seed? Like in your brain when you're drafting, like that's gonna take teams off the
For
table or
sure.
put them on. And then there's also the element of like when you're in certain rooms, like and you get screwed on your stack, like you got to pivot to just trying to cash at a certain point, and then you don't care about the stacking. And knowing when to make that decision like is like impossible to code in. Not impossible, but difficult to code in. So it's surprisingly complex. I know it would seem like it would be easy because you're like, oh, you draft, the Bills, don't draft the Ravens and draft the NFC teams, but it's a little bit more than that for sure. When you get into like some of these edge cases, it's simple on the surface and then like
I was gonna
complex
say,
underneath.
to me, it's just like, yeah, you just press the Bills button, like in the back end, to just bump all the projections by
Well,
20
that
when you
part's
pick.
easy, but
Yeah,
then like when you get sniped or also, I mean, now the seeds are set a little bit more, but like
yeah, the 1 seeds are basically, well, I guess the NFC really could
the
go either
NFC is
way.
open. It could be Minnesota or Detroit
Yeah,
in the
but you removed 40% of the probability of it being the Eagles with them losing to the Commanders, which is nice.
yes. And then the AFC side is obviously set now with Kansas City. Oh man,
Yeah.
I don't
We
for
haven't
a
even
while
That's
there,
true,
this
we haven't
playoff
even talked about this.
dude, for a while there, the playoff bracket looked like it was being good for the Bills, and now it's gone
Now
all
it's
KC's
brutal.
way. It's gonna be Baltimore, Buffalo round 2. And
Do you hate the Reed Mahomes Chiefs more than you hated the Brady Belichick Patriots, or it's still not even close? It's still Brady Belichick Patriots way worse.
I think it's always I also think the time in my life when Brady Belichick Patriots came up was when I was like full
So into it.
tribalistic.
Couldn't have been more of a Bills fan.
Yeah, like totally like the token tribalistic Bills fan. Like now I'm more rational about it. So um yeah. I also like Reed more than Belichick just in general. Like, but
Well,
the,
yeah, you don't feel that, and obviously this is easy for me to say, but it doesn't feel like the Chiefs are like cheating. No, cheating is
cheating. I was like, is that the word you're gonna
cheating, conniving, undeserved, maybe. I don't know. Like obviously the Chiefs do get a lot of calls. I would never debate that. You can't really tackle Mahomes. If your hand hits Mahomes' helmet, you're getting a flag. You can't tackle him when he's going out of bounds. You'll get a flag. Like I do sympathize with that. Don't sympathize. I actually enjoy it a great amount, but I get
Yeah.
why people complain about that. But I hated the Patriots too. And I don't know, to me it feels different. I just think they're more likable. Like Mahomes is so much more likable than Brady ever was. Brady was never likable.
Yeah, I'm also like, talking about like the Goggins stuff. I guess I would put like Brady and
Yes.
like more in that Goggins mode of like this this example of success that people think they should strive after of like
Mhm.
being a maniac that like, maybe isn't healthy for most humans and is glorified, but
Yeah, and Mahomes has a beer belly.
uh but this playoffs, man, I mean, can we just win one? Like, oh God.
It
I
it's
just don't know if
it's
I can. It's
well,
so
you know what really might happen is the fucking Bengals could end up making it, and the Bills would have to go Bengals, Ravens, Chiefs, Super Bowl.
that would be an insane gauntlet.
Meanwhile,
I was also like,
the Chiefs
Allen's
get a bye and then play the Steelers.
the other thing that's breaking is like, all right, Allen's finally going to get his MVP. Like we can celebrate that. And now it's
Yep.
like Lamar's like not so fast. I also
They're
hate the discourse around that too. So it's like really totes me.
Yeah, you should root for your guy. If I had to vote,
You should root for your guy, but like the Bills fans are like so defensive over it that it's like
really not great.
it's like, dude, like Lamar and like they're both clearly deserving MVPs. You know, in any other year they'd be like landslide MVPs, either of them. So I don't know, like everyone's just so snarky and sarcastic about like tearing the other guy down that they don't want to win. It's like, what are you gonna do? You know, it's not Allen's fault that Lamar is just going nuke. It's not Lamar's fault. Allen's going nuke, but I do hope Allen gets it because I think he probably should have gotten it last year. Just
that's the thing is he should get it just based on the sense of like Josh Allen should have an MVP and Lamar probably shouldn't have 3. You know,
last year the team success stuff, just kind of the narrative of the way things broke, and then the Bills finishing the season going full boomer ball really made it easy for people to vote for Lamar, and I 100% understood why people voted for Lamar. But shout out to Aaron Schatz for actually voting for Allen, who was like probably more deserving last year. This year they seem like they're like legit dead even.
I think I'd vote Lamar just because I'm a hater. Like it's so hard for me to be unbiased because I hate the Bills because of Liam. It actually has nothing to do. Like they all seem likable, but I'm just like fucking Liam, man. I can't deal. I don't know. Lamar, I also am just biased towards Lamar. I'd be fine with either one of them winning it. And Josh seems like a nice guy. You should get an MVP.
He's a really fun player to root for sure.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that you're big dorky. It's like having a big 240-pound first baseman. It's the best. Like you can't beat that.
It's insane, dude. It's just like, oh man.
The rolling to the right out of the sideline throws, incredible. Normally, when you see a quarterback rolling too far to their right, you're like, this is going to be terrible. And then with Josh, you're like, this is probably a touchdown.
The other thing my brain can't handle is like the Bills losing a close playoff game that could have gone either way to a really good team. And then everyone's like, fire McDermott. And I'll just be like,
you'll be like, but look at the point differential of the regular season the last 5 years. No one's even close.
That'll be me, 100%.
I think
it's just so funny because I was like so anti-McDermott for a while, and now it's like flipped.
I think he's fine, but I just think he should have been fired because of the DeMar Hamlin Make-A-Wish play. I think that to me.
Okay, and we're on opposite sides because I'm convinced that was actually like a smart play that didn't work.
Shope likes it too. It's not that bad in the grand scheme.
No, if he was fired for anything, it was 13 seconds.
13 seconds.
Because by all accounts, he blew that. But are you really gonna like as bad as it was? Are you gonna fire a guy who's like a really good coach because he botched like one thing that was super important?
I think they would have to have a very good Josh Allen co-signed succession plan in place. I don't think firing him and then hiring Freddie Kitchens or like, you know what I mean? Like just another
Ben Johnson coming in.
Yes. Then you say, thanks for your service, man. We really appreciate you. What if they did I don't know his front office acumen, but what if they did a Celtics guy? Not Spence Stevens. What if they did that? He got promoted.
He wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't do that. But
I think McDermott's like pretty clearly a top 10 coach in the league, though. But
it's so hard for me to weight defensive coaches because I don't have any ability to understand what he does on that side of the ball that makes them good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess I've the last few years gotten, my younger self would kill me for saying this, more into like the culture stuff and like the
culture stuff is inarguable.
Like you see Tomlin. Like with Tomlin. Yeah, Tomlin. I think the stuff we see, we want to like, we love offense and we see it and we know about fourth down decisions. So like, and I think that stuff is important, but is probably just like one of many subsets to coaching. And he's also gotten a lot better at the game day stuff. He still messes some stuff up. Like the Rams game was like absolutely outrageous, but they've tapped into, and I'm hoping they continue to do this in playoffs, that like they have the best short yardage player in NFL history in Josh Allen, and they should just go for any 4th and short no matter what.
And they're going to play a team that refuses to do quarterback sneaks in the AFC Conference Championship game. So maybe
if they get by Lamar.
Andy, if you are listening to this, just sub in Carson Wentz for a quarterback sneak, please. Can we just have
have Kelsey take it?
Have Kelsey. Noah Gray's done it. Just have Noah Gray do it if you want Mahomes out there. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right, everyone. That is home. That's actually where we started this. Well, way back. In fact, Michael, we did this so long ago, back in episode 1. I was still a Cowboys fan then. I was like coming out. I was like it was like the end of it. But Mahomes was still at Texas Tech. Mahomes was Mahomes.
Are you serious? So good. That's before I said how bad the Josh Allen pick was. So that's good.
Oh, Josh Allen was like 3rd team all freshman Mountain West. It was beginning of 2016.
Was it really that long
when I started
ago?
this? Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Josh was not
We're
even
old.
Josh was not even a twinkle in your eye, brother. I was like 23. I was a child.
Not anymore.
not anymore. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. I will be back next week. Drew Dinkmeyer, actually, if you enjoyed this, Drew is going to be on in 2 weeks. So you'll get the other side of the Statler and Waldorf coin. Then, later, everybody.